Hi, this is Amanda.
And this is Jen.
And you're listening to Just This, a podcast that explores everything around being and becoming a mother or parent.
We're excited to have you join us as we dive into the practical details as well as the unseen energetics on topics that span from preconception to years after birth.
All right, we're back. It's been a minute. We took a little pause.
Amanda took a pause.
We took a pause. Hopefully you appreciated the pause, it's very fascinating. Our topic for today, which we had planned to release in July, is all about the pause, which we'll get into in the episode. And I was out of the country for the month of July and had every intention of doing all this productive stuff, including edit a podcast and getting some things out there. And it just, as I was listening to this episode before it came out, I'm like, I don't need to do this right now. This is a perfect reminder of why we take the pause. Mm-hmm. So hopefully the pause brought you good things too.
It did. I just thought it was so funny because you're like, no, I'm gonna record. We're gonna record on plenty of time. I'm like, but you're on vacation, just enjoy it. You're like, no. Yeah. So I'm really happy, although I'm giving you a little bit of ruffled feathers here. I'm really happy you took your pause and enjoyed your vacation so much because that's what it is about. We need to have that pause.
We need to have that pause. It just was like a nice, beautiful way to integrate and actually live in action, not just talk about something that we are sharing with everyone in this community. So that is why we were gone. I also was laughing because last year around this time, we also took a pause. That was like an unexpected one. So now we're learning we just build in the pause as needed, probably during the summer each year. We wanted to just start off this episode with saying hello, we're back. We missed you, and hopefully this episode will give some insight as to ways you can take a pause too, and just the timing of it's perfect. So anything else you want to say?
Just enjoy the pause. I think that's the hardest thing about the pause is like feeling okay about taking the pause. Yeah. So take the pause.
It's worth it. Do it. Yes. All right. Enjoy this episode and let's get into it. Today we're going to talk about this thing Jen, she brought up, and I was like, oh, this is cool. I actually didn't really know the term for this or have really talked about it too much. So I'm excited. It's called the pause. I like this, the pause. And you want to just start with?
Yeah.
I asked, what is the pause? What are we talking about?
The pause is actually referred to I picked it up, learned about it in home birth midwifery. And the pause is that moment after baby comes out where it's just nice to pause and give baby a moment to like transition, right? Because baby's been working really hard, mama's been working really hard, and baby sometimes just needs a moment to kind of, hey, I'm on earth in non-water environment. And also it's been seen during birth, like immediately after birth, that there's actually a pause too with mom. Like sometimes baby is handed directly to mom, but if you've been to a few births, you'll notice that sometimes moms actually need, and of course moms, I mean pregnant person, need a pause as well. And so they're not necessarily likely to like go and grab baby right away. It's like they just need a moment and then they pick up baby, or they'll slowly kind of stimulate baby and talk to baby. Think, just as a preface, the only time we shouldn't do a pause if baby is clearly not transitioned well, which is usually you can tell by color like immediately. But generally babies can come out and we could take a pause, which is like a breath, which if we take a breath is no more than 20-30 seconds. And I just brought this up because also I feel like in life, sometimes we need to take pauses too. And I know Amanda's probably like, yeah, Jen, you need to pause. But I've been kind of pushing so hard and I've been getting so much signs that I actually need to pause.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think this can relate to a lot of different things in life. Another thing that comes to mind is a celebratory, like you've reached a milestone, you just had a fucking baby. Mm-hmm. Take a pause kind of thing. Yes. And that can relate to a lot of things of realizing when we complete a project or when we complete something in our life, not a lot of us just jump to the next thing versus taking a pause and soaking it in. I would love to know, what does a pause look like? Like, now that we know the concept or idea, what does it actually look like in birth? For example, the baby comes out, who's holding the baby? What is is it that it's the pause with the baby on mama's skin? Like, what exactly does that pause look like if you were, for example, helping
Delivering.
us deliver a delivery for somebody?
Yeah, I think the main thing, especially with the pause with baby, is not just automatically going and stimulating them, right? Because we're often rubbing them as they come out and like getting their feet because we want to hear that beautiful cry immediately after. And so that's usually immediately when baby comes out, kind of stimulate and make sure they're crying and breathing. And that pause is really just meant for everyone else in the room to kind of just take a second and assess, like, hey, we're in this new situation now. We have a baby that's outside and we have a mom that just gave birth, and all the stress leading up to it, and maybe not stress, but intensity leading up to pushing baby out. It's nice to have that moment. And so it really depends, as far as like what it looks like is going to depend, of course, on each birth. Mama is on all fours. That's going to look very different because generally baby is placed under them through their legs. So when mom is ready, she can actually look down at the baby and start to stimulate baby, which is by touching and that type of thing. Of course, cold air will kind of usually stimulate that response too. But as far as that goes, that pause is like just giving baby a moment before we sit there and wake up, cry, cry, hey, I just came into the world. Can we give a second? And I really relate it to sometimes to when we're out busy with the kids and we come home, we need that moment to just settle in for a second, transition things, put things away. It's really like that pause, that moment of transitioning into like a new thing and then going on to our other, activities or whatever. And in birth, it's really just that second, a moment to just gather yourself and also not, it really is meant to help us take a moment to not get into the habits of things that we're doing. Like, does this baby really need to be stimulated right now? No, it's pink. It looks like it's breathing. It's got movement. And it's like a constant thing instead of like automatically hopping in and being like, we got to rub this baby and mama's got to touch it. It's like, no, if mama needs a moment, give her a moment, right? To come and be with them. And usually it's a very natural unfolding that happens. And I just think, like you said, we tend to rush through life so much that we don't pause and really admire that moment. And so I always enjoy watching it when baby comes out. Oftentimes there's a moment, there's not a lot of immediate grabbing. Sometimes there is, but there is that moment where you could just tell mom's in the body, just totally processing everything that just happened. And then the baby, they're usually just kind of coming into their own too. And so, yeah, does that answer your question of what it
Yeah,
looks
I
like?
think that helps. Yeah, I
Yeah.
just was wondering because there's so much that's going on
Mhm.
from the person's perspective, that there is it's almost hard to remember that
Mhm.
moment, right? I
Yeah.
think there's just so much, maybe as as an observer or an assistant in the birth, it's easier to see that moment
Mhm.
versus the person who's been going through everything. Maybe that moment just actually just occurs and you don't even realize it sometimes, that there is this pause in there. And
Yeah.
I think the birthing person's probably so in it. We're so gone
Mhm.
into other worlds
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
the pause probably naturally happens. And it's almost interesting thinking about this, if you are in these deep states and yet you have this world going on around you that is not in that deep state with you. So it's almost an honoring and remembering that this person is in a different place right now. Both of
Mhm.
these beings are in a different place right
Yeah.
now, and giving this pause to allow them to remember what's going on around them, because
Yeah.
they've just gone into a trance basically, and you have an alien there that just came into the world.
Totally. There's this one image I have of this birth, and literally it looks like an alien. And it was just those like the head was just out. And
Yeah.
again, when you're observing, all this feels so long, but we're talking, I mean, the pause, we're talking like 30 seconds, right? Like we're talking minimal time. As a provider and observer, that 30 seconds, if you're not sure how baby's doing, that could feel like a long time. And yeah, as a mom, you just birthed out usually 5 to 7 pound and higher, up to like 10, 11, pound baby, and went through this pregnancy for 9 months, went through birth for X amount of hours, 4 hours, like 3 days. Because what is it that the pause is providing? It's providing us to just step back for a second and just observe things. Because like you said, we're just all in it, right? We're all in it with mom. And even in her deeper states, they've even shown that people in the room with them, with the birthing person, will also kind of get into a state as well.
And also, just the act of birthing for the baby is
Mhm.
trauma. Like we've
Yeah.
talked about this in other podcasts. Birth has an element of trauma. It does. Whether
Mhm.
it's how we relate to it afterwards, and we can like heal whatever that trauma is. Sometimes it's more intense for people, sometimes less. But what your body's going through is
Yeah.
traumatic, right? It is
Yeah.
on some
Yeah.
level. And same for the baby. Like what
Mhm.
that journey is. I mean, that is like their little body is forcibly pushed through
Yeah.
this very shiny tunnel. And that is very like they come into this world, a little bit of trauma that we just went through there. And so
Mhm.
that's where the nurturing but yes, I think the pause sounds like it's part of this whole allowance of the beginning of okay, this just happened, and then we
Mhm.
move forward from here. And it just reminds me too, we have another episode on slowing down and these little moments. Sometimes when we say slow down, it can feel like a lot. People, well, what does that mean? How do I slow down? And it can be as simple as taking a 30-second moment, a 30-second pause that allows that pace. We always say to children, take a breath. It's similar.
Mhm.
Take a breath,
Yeah.
take a sigh,
Right.
and then we'll move forward.
Right. And they even say it too. I did a lot of training like for first aid and things like that for lifeguard. And then of course in the medical field it's consistent. But that's one thing they say too, especially pool training, is that you never rush in. Like whenever you come into a scenario, they want you to
Assess the
pause and
situation. Yeah.
assess the situation, because if we just run in, we're not really taking a big perspective of look. And that's also what that pause in birth is supposed to be providing. Let's take a look. What's going on? So the reason I brought this up too is that we need to bring that into our life sometimes too. And it's extremely challenging sometimes because it's hard to imagine that taking a moment or taking a pause is actually beneficial to us because, like, no, we got to get it done. But sometimes taking that pause, getting a broader perspective, our minds are fresh. We see things from a different angle. We're able to just execute things clearer and faster because we did take that break and we gave our mind a rest, because the brain is essentially almost like a muscle too, right? We can't just, it's not a machine. We can't keep forcing it to do things.
Talking about energy and energetic alignment, it's when you've gone so far to the yang energy, right? The fire, it you need to bring it back into balance. And that's where the pause allows you to realign your energy. And if energy is out of alignment, that no matter what you're doing is not going to be efficient, effective, it's out of balance and can lead to a lot of other things, making poor
Homeostasis.
decisions, making
Yeah.
mistakes,
Hmm.
all of the above. And just things being woo here, even just having that energy unbalanced, things will seem harder, even when maybe they're the exact same from another observer, but more obstacles might come your way. It'll just feel harder. So there is the element of energetic alignment. And I always tell my friends, and I know this, and it is hard, but it's when you don't have the time that you need to pause and take the yoga class or pause and do the breath work. It's when your schedule is jam-packed that you need to build your pause in, because in some ways, even though you think you don't have the time, when you do take your yoga class or do your breath work or take a nap, we've talked about this as well, link to that one, the sleep, take a nap, it can really, the amount that you'll get done after and in the efficiency, you're saving time in the long run.
Right. It's like waking up rested to confront your day versus being up all night with your child and then having to get up and do the same thing. It's just gonna, your mind is gonna be better. You're gonna be more efficient on a rested day versus not. And I love that idea of balancing out that energetic, because I think it's so true. We tend to just push, and it's nice to remind ourselves to balance, because if we don't, it's just adding on, right? There's a parenting advisor type. She talks about kids that they kind of have like an emotional backpack. And at school, like rocks go in. Oh, a kid pushed the kid. They didn't like this. And so each time something happens, a rock goes in, right? And it could be small stuff. They ran out of chocolate milk or something like that, right? It doesn't have to be a huge event. but that's like a stress and that's a rock into the backpack. And so by the time they get home, their backpack is generally full and they want to release it. And so I think that's also with relating to what you're talking about is we tend to go through life, and if we don't take that pause, we're just adding rocks and rocks and rocks to our backpack. And that pause allows us to be like, hey, do I really need these rocks? Are they here? Let's like release them so we can move forward without all this extra weight.
And I think just coming from a postpartum perspective, I want to build on how I find this so valuable because after the birth, while it's great to do it immediately after the birth, I think in that first year, realizing because all of a sudden you're thrown into this new world of parenting, and a lot of parents can become very overwhelmed, can just feel a little bit discombobulated. They're getting used to the world of no sleep, all the things. And remembering to take a pause, and it can be hard to remember. So I always recommend people put it on your calendar, put a timer on your phone once a day or 3 times a day to just take 3 breaths and just be there. I remember one thing, I had a meditation practice prior to having a child, and with a newborn, a meditation practice is not possible. It is your every day is your non-meditation practice. But just being able, just a timer that just allows you to take 30 seconds, I think is very valuable. And then I always like to remind partners and couples, take a pause together. Like that's something as simple because again, your connection with your partner can really change and the dynamics can change because everything is focused around baby for many months, if not years. And remembering to, even if you just at the end of your day, if you build that into, okay, before we go to bed, we take 30 seconds and we look at each other's eyes and we take a breath. We're doing this. Whatever the hell you want to say to each other.
Right.
You can
Hold
come up with,
hands
I
or
have friends.
hug.
Yeah, a hug. I have friends who the best is when you have some phrase that makes you feel magical and you have your partner, you say it to each other, whatever. And there's some crazy phrases out there I've had people come up with, and but it's something special and unique to you. So, but it can be so small. And I love this idea of starting your journey into parenthood with a pause, but then remembering to add it in because like you said, the more you practice this from the beginning, the easier it's going to become for you to realize in a moment of crisis when you kids screaming around you and you're trying to get out the door to an appointment to like remember it's like in your soma, okay, I'm gonna just take 30 seconds to breathe here versus be reactive or how we are normally taught to be or modeled to be in our societies. I was just like, it's so interesting that probably in hospital births, this isn't, hopefully it's becoming more, depending on where you live, more honored, these kinds of practices. But it's so interesting that we start our life in this immediate response, even as a baby that's immediately brought upon you. And this is we do ingrain this stuff in our soma on a very deep level. And this is the stuff we're unlearning as adults. It's great if we could teach our children this from a very beginning, and we're unlearning and we're learning with them. But it's just so interesting that in general, our society operates this way. And this is what we're immediately implanting energetically into a baby as they come into this world.
Absolutely. That's interesting. I never thought of it like that. So the other one too, you talk about the postpartum, the French, of
The
course.
French do a lot of things right.
Yeah. And so
We'll
one
give
of
them
the,
some credit here.
yeah, they do. I mean, heck yeah.
Just a side note, most countries, the postpartum care
Yeah.
is 1,000 times better than what we have in the States. If anybody out there is in some organization that is helping to, I don't know, some civil organization, I'm so passionate about this because every single person I've worked with that comes from another country tells me about all the amazing things they get in their country for postpartum care. And it's just, I mean, countries you wouldn't even think of. Like countries
Yeah.
you'd be like, oh, you don't expect that kind of care to be included. And we suck. The United States sucks when it comes to postpartum care. Okay. I'm just gonna say it.
Maternal fetal care, it does in general.
Yeah.
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 I mean, for a first world country, we do not have rates that we should be
Yeah.
having.
Most of Europe will have pelvic floor specialists and in
Yeah.
other countries too. So
But
where
I
were
don't
you
like
going with
to
that? Let's go.
fancy.
So the
Okay.
pause.
So the
Yes.
pause, the French, we have a tendency here, and I did it, was that as soon as baby cries, we run and
Mhm.
go to baby to make sure that they're not crying. The French, they really believe that we should take a pause. I don't think they call it a pause, they call it
They
something
do.
else. They
They
call it a
do
pause?
because
Okay.
there's some book out there, I
Yes.
forget, that is about, and I will again link this. It's about building good sleep habits, because there's this thing about how the French generally, their babies are sleeping through the night on average much. Call it the pause. Continue from there. And I can get on. I feel like there's a blending of things. Some people take this and like they read it seriously and it's like, okay, like, but then they get on this like strict, like, I'm gonna sleep train my baby and this is how I'm gonna do it. Guys, we're still got a newborn here. Like, it's okay to let the baby sleep in the bed with you a little bit. It's okay to let, it's okay to implement these things and also create a good attachment style for your baby right
Yes.
now.
When you're sleeping and co-sleeping specifically safely, of course. Yeah, you're probably not gonna do a pause. You're gonna be like half
Yeah.
awake, waking up and giving baby what they need.
Yeah.
So that's another way that they do it. And they say it's so beneficial because it actually teaches the baby to kind of self-regulate. And I'm
Mhm.
talking, again, 30 seconds, right? Which when a baby's crying max, it's just
Well,
take a moment. We don't have to rush in. We could be like, okay, let's go get the baby and see how they're doing.
so what the pause, yeah, so we didn't define this really. What the we're referring to is pausing before you react to a baby's noise or cry.
Mhm.
And that's what the French pause with sleep is. And honestly, when it's your baby, you're so in attunement to every little
Mhm.
noise. And I often get asked this is how do I know when to pick up the baby and how do I know when they're just uncomfortable, this, that, especially when they're going through that digestive
Mm.
readjustment and they're gassy and all the things. They are grunty, they are like all night long, kicking their legs around. And I often let them work the discomfort out a little bit on their own. And in some ways, if they are uncomfortable to the point of really being discomforted, they will cry. They will cry,
Mhm.
come hold me. That's what they're saying. If
Right.
they're just like, like they're just trying to kick that little gas down the tube. And I just let them do their thing because
Mhm.
that is also teaching them again how to work the gas through, or they're just they're not even sometimes as uncomfortable as what we might imagine them. We're putting that discomfort into
Mhm.
we're putting that on them. They're babies. They're just yeah, they're working it out, but who's to say like how discomfortable they are? I think, and oftentimes also a baby will cry out, and sometimes it's like, ah, and then they're done.
Yeah.
Just the one little cry. And it's interesting. I'm in this book club thing, and it's about somatic things. And one of the exercises we had to do was when lay in a bed as if we were a baby. This is getting out there, guys. And anytime we needed something, we can't talk. So as if we were a baby, we just had to like cry, primarily cry, like use our baby communication if you want a blanket or if you're thirsty or anything. And some people might do this alone, and it's just to get you back in that primal, but it kind of reminds you of, okay, at what point do I really desire something? And then how do I primally cry for it? And
Mm.
in some ways, like if you even don't even have to do that exercise, but if you think about it, at what point is your baby actually communicating to you, hey, come help me? It's when
Mhm.
they're really revved up crying. It's not
Right.
just like big squeak squeak boop boop. It's when they're like wah wah, they're like letting it out.
Yeah.
So if you ever want to try that exercise, I highly recommend it to people because it really gets you in touch with that primal baby. It can really get you back on that level. Even more fun when you have another person who has to figure out what you want.
I try to always tell families and say their communication and the language of your baby is crying. That is it. That's how they communicate. They're happy, they're sad, they want food. Okay, maybe not happy, they're probably not crying, but they want food, they want to be held, they want whatever their needs are, it's crying. And even really into toddlerhood too, right? I mean, maybe they're starting to point, but all the way up into that phase, the way that they try to communicate is really through crying and then as they get older, body
Voices.
language. Yeah.
Dude, so another tangent here. I saw recently, like we're in the world of AI as we're going in, diving in, people. That's what's happening. There are baby cry translators that
Yeah.
like apps now. So it will listen to your baby's cry and supposedly tell you. And we'll link this video from a long time ago. There's a
Yeah.
video, this person who was on Oprah
Uh-huh.
way back when that actually had the five main sounds of baby cries,
Hmm.
and it's based on where their tongue is in their mouth. Like if they're hungry, their tongue's going to be higher. If they're So that you can tell if they're hungry, uncomfortable, this or that. But this AI baby cry translator, like supposedly, if you put it on, will tell you what kind of a cry your baby is having. And these are all tools. I mean, I'm not saying they're good or bad. I do think it's like great to also pick up on all the other cues your baby uses to communicate with you. There's a million cues out there, so.
Don't feel bad if you don't understand your baby's cry 'cause It's not easy. But that video was amazing because she had 6 babies, I think, out, and none of them were crying. They were all quiet for that show. It was amazing. I couldn't personally hear the differences in my son's cry. I don't know if you ever tried to hear them.
I'd also had trouble. You're building a relationship with your baby, so as things go on, that communication becomes deeper than just the crying. And that's another thing too, when you're taking a pause. Yes, the baby cry, but if it's not ramped up, see all the other things and that what's going on.
And that pause too can give you a moment to like maybe even hear it, because I was not great at doing the pause postpartum. But maybe that pause will actually give you a moment to like hear the cry, and maybe it will begin to over time start to sound different, or pausing so that your body can intuitively tell you what baby's saying to you. And I love that you take a pause. I love the idea of taking a pause with a partner. I think that's so important because especially physical touch, it's such a fast way to connect, and to have that second just to be like, I love you, or we've been working hard, or we're doing this, or whatever. Just that moment and a little bit of reassurance can feel so good in the postpartum, because you really are just kind of surviving in a lot of ways, in a good way, hopefully, in most cases. The whole point of this is for us, as individuals in our lives, to also
take a pause. If you're pregnant, I think this is a great opportunity to speak to your birthing team about that too, and just introduce the concept. And if you haven't been practicing pausing, maybe challenge yourself this week to see how frequently you can take a pause, or at what points, or where do you naturally take a pause. Just kind of be more aware of the pauses. Pausing before communicating with somebody, good idea all the time.
Really good. And I think too, a lot of times when we tend to go on social media, the times I just need that break. Like I need to just take a pause, and then I'm okay. But social media is like effective way to take a pause.
Yeah, I know we really should be sitting and breathing, but I agree with you. I do think sometimes I have the same thing where I'm like, I'm gonna give myself 5 minutes. And I'll, find funny videos and laugh my ass off and see my friends are doing something, and it's great. And also we should probably balance that with making sure we're bringing a pause to breathe in a breath or two. So it's like, okay, maybe, and this time I do my social media, and then the next time I do my breath or two. But it's everything's a balance. But I agree. I totally do the same thing where I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna take 5 minutes to take this break right now.
And it's usually social media as opposed to a literal pause and a break.
Depends. There's sometimes where I'll just take 5 minutes to lie on like the sofa and just lie there. Oftentimes it's not, it doesn't look like, and this is the beauty, I think, of what we're trying to say, is it doesn't need to be dogmatic like a regular meditation. It can literally just be like, I'm just gonna sit and watch the birds for a minute. I love watching birds.
Me too.
Very peaceful.
They are.
Sit and watch the birds for 30 seconds, your life will change. I learned this thing about naming 5 natural things around you. And I find that to be a nice way. It's actually a tool I learned for adults, but then I use it with children. And I'm like, it's great for myself, where I'm just gonna find 5 things right now that are like, I see the grass blowing in the wind, I see a bird, I see a cloud. Just 5 natural things that I just point out to myself. That's a good little pause.
Regulates the system, gives you a fresh perspective, and centers you so that
it attaches you. The thing with the natural, I think it attaches you to grounding with Gaia.
And I'm a big bird watcher too, and I'm glad you said that.
Birds are so cool.
I'm like, am I getting old because I just want to watch birds?
I'm like so peaceful about it. We have a little baby frog too, an African dwarf frog, and I sometimes my pause, literally a lot of times my pause is when I walk in the house. I go over that tank and I'm just like, hey buddy, just watch him swimming around.
Take your pause, share your pause in the comments.
Yes. And see how the pause changes your life.
Hey there, amazing listeners. We just want to say a huge thank you for tuning into our convo on the Just This podcast today. We appreciate each and every one of our listeners, and your continued support means the world to us.
If you enjoyed this episode and found value in it, we would be incredibly grateful if you could take a moment to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform, or share this episode with someone you think would enjoy it too. Your reviews and shares not only motivate us, but they also help others discover our show.
We're also all about keeping the conversation going and hanging out with our incredible community. Head over to justthis.site, that's JUSTTHIS.SITE, where you'll find additional resources, ways to connect with us, and join the conversation. plus some more goodies.
Thank you again for being a part of the Just This community. We'll be back soon. Until next time, remember to take care of yourself and embrace the wonder as you navigate this extraordinary adventure.